Hey guys, this is your friend Iggy back again. Today I'm going to build a computer for you inside of the Fractal Design Define R6 TG black case. The motherboard I'm going to be using is the EVGA Z370 FTW motherboard along with the Intel Core i7-8700K processor. I will also be utilizing the Arctic Freezer 33 eSports 1 CPU cooler, along with the EVGA GeForce GTX 1080 Ti video card, and then the Samsung 850 500 gig Evo, along with the Kingston A1000 NVMe PCIe SSD, the PATRIOT Ignite 480 gigabyte SSD, along with the Kingston UV500 SSD, the Western Digital WD Blue 500 gig. Then I'll also be using the Cooler Master Silent Pro Gold 1200 watt power supply, along with 32 gigs of PATRIOT DDR4 RAM as well. An entire system, awesome components, and well, I'm going to show you guys how to build it in case you don't know how to, and maybe if you do know how to, I'll give you some pointers. Before I install the motherboard and everything into the case, I'm going to first install the CPU, the Intel Core i7-8700K processor, onto the EVGA Z370 FTW motherboard. And then also, when I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and install the Arctic Cooling Freezer 33 eSports 1 onto the CPU. And then from there, plug it into the case. So now, before we touch the motherboard and the CPU and everything else, we're going to need to get rid of all the ESD from our body. So you can either wear the wrist strap onto maybe the case, or an easy way to do it, the way I do it for every single one of my builds, is I just put my hands all over the metal inside of the case, and that gets rid of all the static from my hands. So now I can touch all this. Mind you, I still have the tray right on here, so I'm not going to mess up the pins, but I can touch everything else, and then I'm safe. Here we have the CPU, again, the Intel Core i7-8700K. So now, before I take this out of here, you're going to want to take off this little tray here. This tray protects the pins under that from getting bent up and broken. So if you bend any of those, you're going to void your warranty, so be careful with them. So just lift it up, and it's out. I always save these because you never know when you're going to take the board out and maybe do some other upgrade or something, or maybe upgrade your CPU. Okay, so just put this aside, and I'm going to save it inside either of the boxes. So now we take the CPU out of the little tray. Okay, now make sure you don't touch any of these gold contacts underneath the CPU. The grease from your fingertips can mess things up, and you definitely don't want to mess anything up. You don't want to mess up the way that the CPU makes connection and contact with the pins on there. Again, just keep your hands around it, don't touch it. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in so that you guys get a better view on how to get in there. Okay, so first off, we see this little bar right here, and then there's a tray right here. Okay, we need to take this out to lift that tray to get the CPU in there. So just going to push that down, pull it out a little bit, and lift it. Okay, now that it's lifted, I can just pull back on this little bar, and you see how that lifts the entire tray out of the place. So that's good. So now, in order to install the CPU, okay, you're going to notice there's a notch right here and another little notch right over here. Okay, that goes with the notch right here and right here on the CPU socket. A little bit closer. See that right over here? This notch here and this notch here. That way you know easily how to install that CPU. So now, matching up those two notches, I'm just going to go ahead and drop the CPU in there. Very simple. Now you've just installed the CPU, so now you just lower this little tray. There's going to be two little feet right here. You're going to want to make sure that that goes under this peg right here. So just make sure it's pushed down. You don't need to push really hard, just tap it down and slide this bar back down. Okay, it's going to give you some resistance. You know, it's pushing back right here. So just push back, pull out, down, and let it go back inside. And that's it. Pretty simple, right? So now you've just installed the CPU into the CPU socket. And now we're ready to install the CPU heatsink. Inside of this case, you see there's a cutout right here. Now I could always put the board right in there, install the board, and then I can always put a back plate through that opening there. Let me remove the back of the case real quick. Okay, so now you see my backdrop through the case. That's where you're going to be putting in the back plate, if there is a back plate. On this particular cooler, again, the Arctic Freezer 33 eSports one, there is one. So now we're going to move on to show you how to install that. I'm going to show you guys how to install the Arctic Freezer 33 eSports 1 onto the EVGA Z370 FTW motherboard. Since that is a socket 1151 CPU socket, you're going to notice there's going to be 4 of these little clips to hold the fan in place. Then there's also going to be a little back plate. Again, this is for the socket 1151. Okay, so what you do with these guys is you grab the heatsink, and you're going to notice there's a little hole right over here, and then there's another little hole back here, along with a hole here and a hole here. So this is so that you could put a fan not only in the front, but one in the back as well. But since we only have one fan right now, we're just going to be using the ones in the front. So you'll find this little notch first, and then you're going to just insert that little peg right into that notch. And then on the bottom, you'll find the same notch right over here, the same little hole. I've already installed it once before, so there's all those little scratches, but that's okay. And then we just pull it and we kind of drop it in place. All right, so now we have one of those retention mechanisms. And now we'll just do the same with the other one. Drop it in the little hole here. And then match up the little hole down here. All right, pretty simple, right? All right, and well, it just gets easier. All right, so here's the fan again for the Arctic Freezer 33 eSports 1. Now, they did a very cool thing with this fan. The little cable here where you plug it into the motherboard has another connection right here. That's how you can connect another one of these fans to the back of this heatsink, and you get, you know, push-pull, so it keeps it nice and cool. So now what we'll do is, if you look around here, this way, so you know you're putting the fan in correctly, you're going to notice there's a little line pointing this way and a little line pointing that way. So as long as you have the line pointing towards the fan, that's going to be sucking air through here and exhausting it out of the back of the heatsink. So now we just put it right over here. Okay, and there are little rubber pegs here, right here, 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 and here. That helps things stay quiet. There's less vibration there from the fan on the heatsink. All right, and just pop it on there. And now what you're going to do is, you'll notice there's a little carving, I would say, a little notch right here and down here on this little wire that you've installed. That's going to fall, well, not into this hole, but this hole back here on the CPU fan. So you just push it this way and then pull it a little bit and then listen to it. See how it snaps in place? Then we'll do that same thing right down here. Okay, snaps right in place. And then we'll repeat on this side. All right, pretty simple, right? So now what we're going to do is slide over the motherboard, and don't worry, I do have the foam that came with the motherboard on the back there, so I'm not scraping it all over the table. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we grab the motherboard, And now we're going to grab this guy. You notice there's a little hole here as well, right? So if we turn the motherboard around, that lines up with the hole right here, the back plate of the CPU. So now we're just going to line it up right here. And then these little metal screw holes here, they're going to go inside of here. So, all right, and so then you just want to make sure that those little metal holes go all the way through, and then that little hole shows the screw from this plate back here. So now we can just rest it, wrap back on here, and then you can notice right here and here, and let me zoom in so you can see these over here. Okay, you can notice right here, 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 and here that those little screw holes show up. What we're going to do is we need some thermal paste. Now, I've already been testing this aside from here. So the thermal paste they give you, it's already gone. They give you a little tiny packet which goes away in 1 or 2 uses. So I have some additional paste on the side. I'm going to go ahead and apply some paste right in the center. It's about the size of a pea. Okay. And now it's going to keep coming out, so you just pull back on the little, there we go, and just close it up. All right, so that should be more than enough. So there are several methods. Some people have a credit card method that you put that in there, and then with a credit card you swipe it down, and then some people that put a line. And anyway, so when you push the pressure from the bottom of this CPU plate onto here, it spreads that CPU paste evenly. So let me zoom out. So I've shown you here how to put that CPU fan on, but we're going to go ahead, we're going to need to remove it in order to install the CPU heatsink. So, but now you know how to install it. You're going to keep the wire frame there because it's a lot easier to install it afterwards. Okay, so now I'm going to lay the CPU, this block, right on top of the CPU. Okay, and it might slide around a little bit because, well, you have that thermal paste on there, and that's okay. You just push it down, make sure it doesn't move around. Okay, now there's a little groove right over here and right over here, and that's where this is going to slide into. So we just drop it in that groove, and there's a little hole here and a little hole down here as well. Just make sure you line those up. All right, and we'll turn the motherboard around a little tiny bit so you can see this a little bit better. And now, since that little hole lines up, we're just going to screw in, and I'll show you which of the screws I'm using in one quick second. Let me just screw this one in. Okay. So again, I'm just going to repeat the same thing right over here, and I'm going to be using this little screw right here. And let me show you here what I was talking about. See this little notch right here? That's where this is sliding into place. Okay, and we line up the hole again. Okay, and now we grab these screws for the 1151, sorry. And we just slide it in here. Okay, and we're going into the threading of that screw hole from the back plate, and we're not going to put it very tight. We're just going to make sure it's in there. Now it's still very loose, so now we'll go around. So remember, we just put one right here. You don't want to put one here and then one there and then one back here. So you want to put one here, and then I'm going across this way to this screw hole right over here. Okay, and then dropping that into place. Same thing as before. We're just going to put it in so that it's in place, but it's not 100% screwed down yet. Okay, so it's still very loose. And now we'll go ahead and put one right over here. Okay, and then the last one right over here. Now for the 1150, 1151 CPUs, we're going to be using the hole on the Arctic Freezer 33 eSports 1 closest. There's three little holes here, one here, here, and here. We're going to be using the one closest to the inside of the little bracket. Okay, and now that this is the last screw, now we're going to go ahead and just tighten it up. And then we're going to tighten up the rest as well. You'll know when you're all the way tight when it doesn't screw anymore, and I'm not forcing it. Just, it'll stop when it's ready to stop. And then we'll tighten all the rest of them. Alright, so we're done there. And now we're going to go ahead and put the fan back on, and wherever this goes, it's totally up to you where you want to have it. So to keep it nice, I'm going to have it sticking out towards the bottom. Okay, and I'll show you why in 1 second. Let me just put these all back on. So this one's a lot easier to put back on outside of the case because you don't have the RAM and all the other stuff in the way, so that you can put the fan back on. Okay, great. So that's back in. Now again, the reason I did that is, so now here's CPU fan 1. Let me zoom in for you there. Okay, so here's the bottom of the fan. And the reason I put the cable to come out right here is because CPU fan 1 and CPU fan 2 are right down here. So that way I can just plug it in right here. You'll notice there's two little notches here. They're going to line up with this right over here. And right there. So now we can kind of tuck this out of the way, or maybe tuck it up like this. Because right up here is going to be, or right here I should say, is going to be the top of the case, but we'll get more into making it look pretty as we're doing the building. Alright, so now let's go ahead and install this into the Fractal Design Define R6 case. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and install the EVGA Z370 FTW motherboard into the case. So what we're going to need to do first is count to see how many standoffs there are going to be in the case. So thankfully, Fractal has included an additional standoff there. So you're going to want to verify on your motherboard always when you install into a case that there are enough standoffs if the case already comes with standoffs, and then verify how many holes you have on the motherboard itself and make sure they all line up. So another way to do it would be just put the motherboard in its place. Let's move this out of the way. Okay, so we could just put the motherboard right here, and then we can count, and then we can also see, oh, it looks like there's one missing right here. Okay, so again, I'm just going to take this out of here. Okay, and aside from giving you an additional standoff, they've given you this amazing little tool here. So what this tool does is it allows you to put the standoff right in here, because if you've ever used a standard standoff screwdriver, they're incredibly difficult to use. So it allows you to put that standoff right in here, and you notice there's a little Phillips head right back there, so then we can get our Phillips head screwdriver and just screw that right in place. All right, and that's it. Took seconds. Now with the standoff screwdriver, they're just typically a thin piece of metal like that, maybe a number 2 pencil type of thickness, and they're really thin, so it's really hard to get in there. Anyway, Fractal's also included a little peg right here. Let me zoom in for you on that one. Now this peg is awesome because I can just put the motherboard there, line it up, and this little peg is going to pop out. Because I'm building the computer standing up with the case standing up, everything will line up right there. Most of you are going to build, or should I say all of you except me, are going to be building the computer with the case laying down. I do it standing up because it's a lot easier to demonstrate on how that's going to work. So then we're also going to be installing right back here, the I/O shield. And the way to install it is really easy, but you might get frustrated because sometimes it can be a little difficult. These little notches right here, you'll see they're all over it. And then there's going to be a little lining right here where you install this into. That lining snaps into place over these little pegs, so it can be a little difficult at times. So the way we do it, just line it up right here and pop it into place. Push on one side and you'll hear it clip in place. And that's it. It's installed. Again, it's really easy to install it, but it can be a pain because sometimes those little pegs are a little difficult to push through. All right, so now the motherboard, again, just going to grab it. And we're just gonna lay it in there for right now. And Fractal has included this little box that has all of the screws and everything you need. But on the back, there's a little legend that tells you what every single screw is, which is nice. So you're going to be looking for this type of screw to install the motherboard. So we'll look through all the screws. All right, so then we have this little baggie. All right, there's 15 of those little guys. Okay, and this is where having a magnetic tip screwdriver will definitely help tons. And now we just screw everything into place. And we'll line it up with that little peg. All right, so that peg right now is all that's holding the motherboard in place. Okay, so I'm just going to put one right here for now. Okay. And I'm going to fast forward through this. I'm sure you don't want to see me screwing in 9 screws. Alright, so pretty quick, simple, easy. Alright, and you can see there just how nice she looks. And you know, I'm going to mess around with the cabling a little bit to make that look a little bit nicer, but this is just to show you guys how to build a computer. Now, one thing I do want to mention, it's almost as if Fractal worked with EVGA on this case. Everything seems to fit in perfect. So you can see right down here, I've had this issue with a few other cases and a few other motherboards, but so they have an opening right here for this 6 pin, which EVGA has thought of other people not working with them directly. They've even recessed this a little bit, rose it up a little bit so that you can still fit it, but Fractal's taking care of that. They have a hole right here, perfect. Now, over here, on the last motherboard I had, the EVGA Z270 FTWK, there was a 90-degree USB 3 connection, went straight down here. A lot of cases, while they did have a rubber grommet, the rubber grommet was like right here. And so I used to have to Dremel the case to make it fit, but this is right here. Now, I will say on this particular motherboard, they don't have that 90-degree anymore, so they kind of fixed that problem. But aside from that, if it was, you know, it would work. So good job on Fractal Design there. So now with the motherboard in place, you can see everything's right on here. We're gonna go ahead and just pop in the power supply down here real quick. And you'll notice there is a little housing, which nowadays it's relatively common inside of a case to have a power supply shroud right here. And this one has vents in it, so you can see the, if anything, the sticker on the power supply, because you don't want the fan facing out of here. You want the fan facing down, sucking air in from the bottom, which normally you would freak out. Ah, but there's dust. And yeah, there might be, but they have a dust filter there, so that'll get rid of that. So let's jump to that real quick. Right down here is where we're going to be installing the power supply. And here's where she's going to sit. There are 4 little rubber pegs right here where the power supply sits on top of, so that there's maybe a 1/4 of an inch or less of space between the power supply and the bottom of the case, so it could breathe a little bit better. And then also, again, there is a filter down here to keep all the dust from getting inside the power supply. Now, they have a little frame back here that we are going to need to remove so that we can install the power supply. And thankfully, they're thumb screws and they're not incredibly difficult to take out. So this is the little frame. We're going to pop the power supply in here and screw this right in place. So 1, 2, 3, 4th one right over here. Okay, so I'll just put this aside for right now. Now, I have with me the Cooler Master 1200 Silent Pro Gold power supply, which is an awesome power supply, but a big problem with it is it's only partially modular. So this comes in to be a big pain in the butt sometimes, but this is the only one I have for right now. I'm working out and getting out another one real soon. Okay, so we're gonna grab the jumble of cables and just kind of slide them in and turn them around through here. Now, regardless on it being a modular or non-modular power supply or partially modular power supply, you're going to need to plug all the cables in before you pop the power supply in, because of, well, you don't have a way of accessing from over here. I mean, you could, but it'll just be really tight and really difficult. Alright, so power supply's in. Again, we have that jumble of cables, but that's okay for right now. And then we're going to just screw this back in. Now, 2 ways you could do it. Just pop this back in and then screw it here, and then screw the power supply into the frame, or you can screw the frame onto the power supply, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it this way real quick. Okay, now we just have to move the power supply around a little bit so that we can line up these holes. And since there is no access from this side, it's a little bit difficult, but not impossible. I'm using one of the grommets to fit a finger through. All right, perfectly in place. So now this guy tells me we're going to need, let's see, PSU, right, the first one. Gonna need those 4, and they show me what they look like. Okay, and they're pretty standard. All right, so then we'll just go ahead and screw those in. All right, quick and simple. So now we have the power supply in place. And what I'm going to do is just kind of tuck all the cables right in here. And I just put it in here so that it's a little bit easier later on to actually work with it. And I'm tucking everything in here right now so that as we're spinning the computer around, things don't get stuck everywhere. We are going to get the cabling, but that'll be the second half of the video. So now we're going to go over installing an M.2 PCIe SSD. This is an NVMe drive, the Kingston A1000 480 gig SSD. So you're going to notice there are 3, and let me zoom in closer. Okay, there are 3 M.2 sockets. One up here, which is a key E, and then one here and one here. These 2 are key M's. The key E is for like Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, and the key M is for storage or for PCIe SSDs. Before we just plug it in and go, there's 2 little screws here. You're going to want to take one of the 2 out, of course, since we're only installing 1 drive right now at least, and then just put that aside. So just going to go ahead and take out the bottom one. Okay, and it is a magnetic tip screwdriver. So now the reason I took out the bottom one is your video card's going to be right up here on the first PCIe slot. The card's going to be right underneath it, so, or should I say the SSD is going to be right underneath it, so it's going to get a little hot. So rather than subject it to that heat, I'm going to put it down here. Now, regardless on the heat, EVGA has included 2 thermal pads. Now what we're going to do with those thermal pads is we're just going to go ahead and install it onto the motherboard. It comes with 2 pieces of tape. You can see that right here. Okay, so I'm just going to take out the bottom one, just for right now. And now I'm going to install it in this little black square they've given me. All right, pretty simple, right? So now that that's there, I'm going to go ahead just remove this piece of film right off of the top. Okay, now that we have this, the PCIe SSD, we're going to go ahead and just match up this little notch here with this little notch right over here. Let me zoom in so you can see it. Okay, right over here. Okay, so now we just pop it right in here, slide it in place, and push it in. Okay, at that point you can just let go. Now we have to screw it into that place where we just removed that screw. Because there is that thermal pad there, it's sticking, so it's not moving anywhere right now. Normally it would just pop out like you saw it a second ago. So now we just screw it in place. Alright, so that's it. We've just installed a M.2 PCIe SSD into the EVGA Z370 FTW motherboard. Now let's move on to the next step. We've just installed the M.2 PCIe SSD, but, well, we have other SSDs, regular SSDs to install as well. So we have quite a few options. So spinning the case around to the back, we have 4 trays right up here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 2 trays down here. These are interchangeable between either 2.5 inch or 3.5 inch drives. But then we also have 2 right here. The cool thing about these 2 right here is I can just take one out. It's a thumb screw. Thankfully, it's not very difficult to remove. And I just lift the cage out. Now spin this around to the front. And now I can install those same drives right here as well. So right on top of the power supply, okay, I can just slide that tray in place and screw it in, so you can have 1, 2 drives here, or you can have them all hidden right in the back. So I'm going to go ahead and install a drive real quick just to show you how to do it. So for example, I'll just go ahead and use the Kingston UV500. Just going to line up these holes here, and now looking again in the box, we can see right up here the 2.5 drive screws. There's 32 of them. I have them right here, and they're these little guys here. Just gonna go ahead, I'm gonna do one real quick just to show you how to do it. So line them up, screw it in, and now rinse, wash, and repeat on all the rest. Now through the magic of film, I'm gonna show you how they're all done in a split second. All right, so here you can see I've placed the Kingston UV500 right on top of the power supply. Again, I can put another one here if I want to, but then I've also in the back, I've gone ahead and put the PATRIOT Ignite 480 gigabyte SSD right here. So you can either put this tray in the front, next to this guy right here, or you could take both of them out and just pop them back here. Kind of out of sight, out of mind, and then that way you can plug in everything and not have cables visible all through your system. Out here in the front, they'd be a little visible. Mind you, you can hide them in the grommets here, but still there's a chance you could see them. So now we still have 2 more SSDs though. So we can either use these 2 trays down here, or use one of these 4 right up here. So just to, again, keep things out of sight, out of mind, I'm gonna go ahead and install it onto this, install both of them onto these bottom trays. So we'll just take this out, unscrew this, pull the drive out, or the cage out, sorry, and then we can just pop in the drive right here, like we did before. Match up the holes. Then we'll get one of those 2.5 SSD screws. And screw them right in place. I'm going to use that whole power of magic thing again real quick and screw in all of them and get right back to you. So I've installed the Samsung already down here. Now let's go ahead and install the WD Blue. Now these guys have put thought into everything, even how to install this. It's pretty awesome. So you see this little guy right here, this little tab, it's going to line up right in here first and then latch in. So you install it sideways, kind of, sort of, and then right into place here, right here, and just screw it in place. So even something as simple and trivial as installing an SSD, they've put a lot of thought behind, and I'm pretty impressed. So now that we have the 4 SSDs installed, the M.2 SSD installed, the CPU heatsink, now we need to install the RAM. Should have done that earlier, but that's okay. We'll do it now. Alright, so I have 32 gigs of RAM, 2 sticks of 16 from PATRIOT. Again, these are the PVE 432 G280C6KGY. So now with 4 sticks of RAM, you would install into slot 1, 2, 3, and 4. But since there's only 2, you're going to want to install the RAM into slot 2, the first one into slot 2, and the second one into slot 4. So in order to do that, first off, we're going to pop these little tabs open. Okay, then we grab the first stick of RAM. Then we're going to slide it to the bottom first, like this, and then slide it inwards. So slide it like this, and then pop it inwards. And then this little tab is going to automatically lock in place when it reaches right here. And that locks the memory in place right here. So we're just going to install it here. Push it in place, and then you heard the RAM lock. All right, now that we have that one done, we're going to go ahead and pop in the second stick of RAM. So slide it here, pop it in place. All right, so there you go. Now we've just installed 32 gigs of RAM. Again, each stick is 16 gigs, and the RAM is not very tall, so it does not block the CPU fan either. So you get perfect airflow there. All right, so let's move on to the next step. So next up, we're going to go ahead and install the EVGA GeForce GTX 1080 Ti ICX Gaming Edition. This is the 11 gigabyte card. So in order to do that first, we're going to need to remove 2 of these PCI covers. Now, the top one is for the very first slot, which is a by 1 slot. Right here, you could see that. But we're going to need access to this guy. So we're just going to take off 2 and 3 right here. So before we get to that, I do want to mention that not only can you install the cards horizontally like this, but you can actually install the card vertically also. They give you the option right over here, and so you can see it along the back right here to install, and they have it built in already. You can mount a GPU vertically. You don't need to modify your case or anything. So that is a great little feature there. But because I don't have a riser cable that would plug into here and then come down and have a little mount right here, a PCIe slot, I'm not going to do that right now, so I'm going to go ahead and install it mainstream. Now, you're going to have to angle it a little bit because this gets in the way. And another thing really cool about this case is right now, I'm not installing a liquid cooling unit, but of course you can install up here and along the front of the case or along the bottom of the case, and of course a little baby one right back here. But you can take this out, and of course you would lose these trays up here. If you wanted to put an a larger liquid cooling unit here, or you didn't want to have to deal with this. So this would go all the way back and then give you a lot more room up in the front. So it is a nice little feature there. But we're gonna go ahead first, just put it in this way and then slide it in, and then just pop it in the slot, in the PCIe slot, and then go ahead and screw these in. So one sec while I screw these in. All right, so now we have a completely built system. If you wanted to, you know, if you still had them, right up front here, you could mount an optical drive. Just take off the little cover here and slide in a drive. I'm not gonna go ahead and mount one yet because I'm actually using up all of the SATA ports on the motherboard, but just wanted to let you guys know. Also, when I received this case, this door opened up this way to the left, but the case allows you to easily enough change the way that opens. So now it opens up to the right. All I needed to do was unscrew here, and then put the little retention mechanism here, this guy, and then it would open up this way. So they thought about everything in this case, so pretty cool. So now we're done with the hardware. We've installed the RAM, the CPU, the heatsink, the video card, all the SSDs, which I know right now it looks like there's nothing in there. And if I wanted to, I could remove these trays as well, since I'm not really using them. But I'm going to go ahead and leave them in there for right now. We've installed the PCIe SSD as well, or the M.2 SSD as well. We've installed the power supply down here. And then, of course, hidden all those SSDs back here. So it's going to be a beautiful build, but now we have to do the rough part. We have to do the cabling. So now let's jump over to the second part of the video.
Disclaimer, this product was provided to the author to do a review. All opinions are 100% authors and authors alone. For more information, visit bit.ly/dbdisclose. To have your product or brand showcased on Dragon Blogger, visit bit.ly/reviewmyproduct. Thank you for watching.